Now let's go into a little bit more detail about if you can tell us about the job market in some of the different places in the world. We've had some questions about Asia. I know we have someone online from Vietnam and a couple of other places in Asia that are asking specifically about the job market there.
Great questions. And you know, this is information that's going to be based on people I've talked to. I haven't been in that job market. So let me qualify this by saying this is the information that's been relayed to us. Most of the Asian carriers are hiring, and they cannot hire enough pilots to fill the void. So they're looking at delaying deliveries, parking airplanes, not being able to operate full schedules. That tells me right there that they've got a big demand, and where there's a big demand, supply will follow.
Okay.
Now, we have seen some of the pilot placement services that we've worked with give us email after email. We just are starting a new relationship with a pilot placement service that's placing pilots all over Asia, and they are placing first officers. They're specializing, I think, more in placing first officers than captains. And they said they cannot get enough applicants in their program. So I think the Asian hiring market is probably one of the best there is. It's a tough market. It's better for a national than it is, I think, for a expat. But still, there's lots and lots of opportunities.
Okay, let me turn that around and say, what about if you are someone in Asia that wants to be a pilot in the U.S.? We've had actually a couple of questions going that direction.
Probably a little more difficult, and the reason I say that is less of a pilot shortage here than there is there. If you can get a green card or the ability to legally work in the United States, then I think you have a very good chance of landing a job in the U.S. if you meet the right credentials. The U.S. is a little tougher right now, Paula, because we've recently passed a law here. Our Congress passed a regulation that requires 1,500 hours or an ATP. There's some exceptions on the times, but let's just say an ATP. You have to have the ATP done before you can get a job with an airline. Right. That is not true anywhere else in the world. So the equivalent of a commercial pilot's license and some experience, and you're going to be able to get a first officer job flying an Airbus or a Boeing in lots and lots of places around the world.
Got it.
So what is the preferred type rating right now, the A320 or the 737?
That's a great question. And if you look at statistically, and I wouldn't take it because I said so. I would go online and do some homework and due diligence. But it looks like the Airbus is starting to outpace the Boeing for new aircraft deliveries. You've seen a lot of the Boeings retiring. You see the Airbus staying in there a little bit longer. So I think you're going to see more Airbus airframes, and the Airbus airframe difference tells me there's more jobs on the Airbus.
Cool. All right, so continuing kind of our little tour of the world, how about Africa?
You know, Africa is definitely an up-and-comer. The aviation industry in Africa has really been stifled because it's, you know, not the most industrious region of the world. But you're starting to see the early seeds of industrialism. You see a lot of vacationers going there. Now, we just had this whole Ebola scare, so that might put a crimp in it for a little bit. But we are seeing that industry growing there. Airlines starting up, they're flying Airbuses, they're flying 737 NGs, and that means that there's going to be opportunities in the future. Not as good as Asia. I don't think as good as Central and South America, but I think probably on par with what we'll see here in the U.S. or in Europe.
Okay. Let's just continue with Latin America. Since you started down that road, we'll keep going.
Yeah, Latin America, of course, is the middle class is growing there. They're becoming much more industrialized, much more into the banking industry in certain parts of Central and South America. And I think you're going to see a lot of growth. You're already seeing that in places like Mexico with Vueling, with Interjet. You're seeing that in Brazil with Azul. which is doing very, very well and outpacing any other airline, I think, in growth. You're seeing that with Avianca. Recently, the TACA group merged with Avianca, and we've had some very good friends with Aerogal, which is the airline of Ecuador, now part of that Avianca group. I think those guys are going to do very, very well. Lots of opportunities down there. On that one in particular, I have a very, very close friend of mine whose son decided to follow in his father's footsteps to be an airline pilot. He went to American Flyers, which is an ab initio school, and then he went and got a type rating, and he got hired by Avianca in Bogota, Colombia, and currently today is serving as a first officer for the airline on the A320. Did not have any CFI experience, did not have any other experience, got hired right out of type rating into Avianca.
Fantastic. Great. How about Europe?
Europe is a little bit, I think, more like the United States. You've got airlines like Lufthansa, which has really kind of paved the pathway for ab initio, and they've really shown the rest of the world how to do an ab initio program. They've been doing that for years. So I think Lufthansa's got a steady feed of pilots, and of course Lufthansa Group owns a number of other European airlines. But you're seeing airlines like EasyJet and Ryan Airlines and a lot of startup, small, low-cost carriers. Those small, low-cost carriers really afford opportunities for young people to join a beginning team on the ground level and build their time. Example there, I have a very good friend of mine who went over, and I think he was flying for an airline out of Prague in the Czech Republic. Built his time up there. They hired him very low time, and he is now, I believe, with Virgin Atlantic, flying wide bodies, landed his dream job.
Fantastic.
While she's going to this, Dave, what did it cost you from private to commercial? Any ideas how much you spent? And then should they go to, if they're going to go that route and become a CFI, should it be Part 61 or 141? What would you suggest?
You know, my flight training was done so long ago, I would hate to compare the cost of flight training because, you know, I was in flight school literally 30 years ago, coming up through the ranks. And it was a different time. But I would say right now, on average, people are probably spending to go from 0 time through the commercial multi-instrument and type rating, including room and board, anywhere from $60,000 to $100,000. There are schools that can do it less than that. There are schools that you can spend a lot more. If you add in an education on top of that, like for example, if you're going to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University or some of the other prestigious 4-year aviation universities, it can be significantly more than $100,000 to get the 4-year degree and all the flying.
Right.
One of the cool experiences we've looked at, like we talked about Cochise. Cochise really has a program that is a a la carte, where you could do the private instrument commercial multi-engine. It's under $60,000.
Yeah.
If you add the room and board on there and a type rating, you're still under $80,000. Now, $80,000, John, that's a lot of money. I mean, I got to tell you, if I was a young person trying to come up with $80,000, that's a whole lot of money. But again, the return on investment, if you've got those funds, if you've got those opportunities available to you, you're going to be able to earn that money back.
Right. Well, and you compare that to the cost of a 4-year degree in just about any other field, and you know, $80,000 is really not that much, you know, compared to what it would take to get even a bachelor's degree in, you know, English or social science or, you know, anything else, where the job is not as cool. You know, you're going to end up behind a desk.
Right.
like some of the rest of us. But
one of the listeners is at school at Florida Tech, and they're wondering if they get a chance to get into the regionals after they graduate. So I don't know if that means if they've been through a type school or not.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I got to tell you that I think if they're going to stay domestic U.S., there are going to be a lot of regional airline jobs available for them. So the problem that you're going to have right now in the U.S. is you cannot get a regional job until you have your ATP.
Right.
So the U.S. is operating under a new system that's really challenging for the young men and women that are coming into the market right now, because they've got this legal barrier of trying to get to 1,500 hours before they can go off to the regionals. And this is where you asked me, John, earlier, and I want to circle back to that. If you're flight instructing to build that 1,500 hours, and I certainly flight instructed, I enjoyed it. A lot of my friends hated it. It just depends on your personality. But if you like flight instructing, it's not going to matter whether you're doing it in a 91 or 141 as far as the potential airline employer is going to look at. I think, though, that the 141 schools, depending on the school, might be more structured, and they might be targeting more ab initios that are doing more airline-centric training, like how to use a checklist the way we do in the airlines, or how to follow SOPs the way it's done in the airlines. I think there's some benefit to that.
Right.
Cool.
And so, yeah, just to finish up, and you kind of just did, with the market in North America has been pretty dramatically impacted by that ATP, CTP requirement, right?
It has been. It's been really impacted, and we're not exactly sure how we're going to get over this hurdle, except my hope is that the United States becomes kind of the flight training capital, ab initio flight training capital of the world. What that does is it brings the foreign pilots here to the U.S. so they get the English immersion, they get the use of our open skies airspace, and they're taught by young Americans that are looking to build their flight time. So it becomes a symbiotic relationship where we are helping to train the world, and our pilots, our young men and women, are becoming the instructors to the world as they build their time. And that really is a win-win for everybody.